All right, so I have Marcus Dunn with me today, and Marcus, thank you for being here. I wanted to do a quick introduction for you, a little bio. Marcus Dunn, born in 1986, has exhibited his work at the Florence County Museum in Florence, South Carolina, SCAD Museum of Art in Savannah, Georgia, and the Institute of American Indian Arts Museum of Contemporary Native Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico. He is the 2022 South Arts Southern Prize recipient for North Carolina. His work consists of small and large scale paintings concerning memory and cultural identity. His heritage is Tuscarora PD and non native descent, and is a member of the PD Indian tribe of South Carolina. He is currently living and working in Fayetteville, North Carolina. He is an alumnus of the Skowhegan School of Painting and Sculpture. Prior to earning an MFA in painting from the Savannah College of Art and Design, he earned a BFA in studio art and the Institute of American Indian Arts. Marcus, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me, man.
So, so what would you like to talk about today?
So I was thinking about, well, me as a painter, I kind of address like narrative painting often. Like I feel like my work is like ventured from being more about like portraits of people. I used to use a lot of photographs as resource material, and I don't really use photographs quite as much unless it's like I'm trying to get certain details that I want in a painting, but not directly like referencing the photographs anymore. And the works become more narrative um, in turn. So I wanted to kind of talk about narrative painting and kind of like the ins and outs of that, and like how broad it is as a type of painting, as a style of painting, and just kind of like see where that goes in the
Yeah,
conversation.
sounds great, man. Um, you had mentioned that you had been using photo reference quite a bit, and that you're beginning to pull away from that. So, how is that serving you in your work right now?
I think it's helped a lot. I still look at a lot of photographs for like looking at different type hairstyles and fat like clothing and like how people stand, or just objects that are sitting in a space. I use photographs for those things, but I've pulled away from it as a way to kind of like just to kind of have the paintings kind of happen more from me, as opposed to letting an image dictate what's going to happen in a painting. You know, or letting a photograph dictate what's going to happen in the overall composition or image that I'm trying to make. So, not saying anything like it was like it's a bad thing that people use
Mm-hmm.
photographs. I think it's a excellent tool, and it's like artists like Chuck Close and people like that have used photographs for their art, and have had very incredible results in like how they've like achieved what it is they're trying to achieve with it. But for me, I've been able to use sketching and like um, my drawing techniques more, just by implementing more things out of my imagination, and letting that kind of help sway like what mood or setting or like feel that the painting that I'm trying to get with the painting. So
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
yeah, I think it has helped a lot, and it's something that I'm like really probably within the past couple of years have been really like pushing in my work.
Yeah, that's interesting. I find that, and I meet a number of painters who feel that way too, and I feel that way as well. And um, for me, it's kind of like I get to maybe I got to a point, and it doesn't stay this way. Like I find that it sort of ebbs and flows, but I get to a point where visually, I think I've been exposed to enough um, sort of encounters of form and movement and shape, and studying those like proportions and the the nature or quality of expression of those form and movements in space, um, instances of light and shadow and all that kind of stuff, to where it becomes so present, um, saturated even in the place of my memories, so that things become more real in my memories and less like ephemeral, and they become more substantial. And so I can kind of like draw upon um, my memory and sort of fuse it with those like visual encounters, right? And then something is kind of made, something is created, birthed in a way, in the paintings. You had mentioned that you like to that you're beginning to kind of rely on your drawings. What do the drawings give you that would be different than, say, a photograph?
It gives me the opportunity to see different angles, like because my work is figurative based. I'm dealing with figures in either exterior or interior spaces, and it gives me angles and like being able to like be a little bit more free in how I want like a figure to be placed in a composition. I'm like, okay, if I want them to be facing this way or that way. I don't need to like search for a photograph that shows a figure looking that way. I can just like sketch it and how I think it should look, or maybe two figures interacting. I don't need to find an image of two figures interacting that way. I can just sketch it and a few different versions of that, and just see and just run with that and see how that goes. It it also it's also something that I think about a lot with film and like I think of like film, how film like characters in the film are kind of ever changing, and how they you know not how they're perceived, but like how the director or the cinematographer tries to capture certain angles in a film to like basically just show more detail or show highlight more of what's going on
Mhm.
in certain expressions in someone's eyes, or their how people communicate without even saying things sometimes. And I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah, like
something,
it helps tell the story, right?
yeah,
It helps tell the story. Yeah, yeah.
Hitchcock was incredible for it. I think of like um I think of like the film movies like and I haven't watched it in full. I've only seen clips really. Notorious, and some of the scenes with um what was her name, Ingrid Bergman and Cary Grant, like just how they look at each other and things like that. Like you see them shot at different angles and even pan and zoom shots. Like I think of all those things when I'm making these sketches, and like how I can like find something that is both dynamic but also feels real. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
feels like it's like a genuine like connection with either a single figure in a space or a grouping of figures in a space. So
I
um,
think I think that's kind of interesting, like this idea of something that feels real. Like a candid moment. And I think that oftentimes, even just referring to like a still life, there's a type of you know choreography and design that goes into setting up a still life, which is like sort of its own thing. But then there are moments when like one happens upon a still life moment that had been orchestrated just by sort of the naive result of day-to-day activity, right? It's like this unaware expression of choreographed like form and movement and rhythm, and and to sort of like see that as an artist, to recognize that as a painter, it's like finding it is just as important as being able to design it and choreograph it, right? And the two are really connected, so it's interesting because on the one hand, you know, with photography, which has this amazing ability to truly capture a moment, fleeting moment, um, with all of this, incredible amount of visual information, and then that can be altered, through different apps and programs and things. So we have a lot of tools at our disposal for doing something like that. Whether we want a moment to feel more real or less surreal, or something. And it's interesting that with all of that at our disposal, the idea of drawing um, is kind of interesting because drawing is simply it's like an expression of it's a recording of movements, right? Movements of the hand, right? So like each line is a visual record of movement. And so it literally is it's a choreography, it's a choreographed kind of design. So every movement is considered, and either you keep it or you eliminate it, and this editing goes on, this whole process, until you arrive at this, hopefully, you arrive at the place where you're capturing this feeling. And a lot of times, I don't know for you, but for me it's like the feeling is all that I have to go on. I don't even have a visual semblance of what I'm pursuing. I just have a feeling of what I'm pursuing, and I'm searching for the visual representation of that, the visual expression of that, right? um so like for me, gesture is very important, like the expression of movement, of form in space, and then the energy of that movement, the particular type of energy. And so when we talk about cinematography, there is a gesture uh that is in cinematography. It's the gesture of the camera and how it moves through, how it moves the viewer through the space, right? That's really important. That's actually a huge silent, uh, part of what helps to create this feeling of vitality to a moment, this feeling of realness that gives us the recognition of that. Like, oh, I find myself in this. Like, I've lived this, or I can imagine living this. How terrifying or how wonderful, right? Um, are you searching for moments like this in your work?
Yeah, I am. Like I had kind of like it was one of those things that I mean, I try to go see a lot of shows as much as I possibly can, and like, I went to a David Park retrospective show, and I saw like saw how he approached certain things in his paintings, um, and it was like, yeah, I don't know if you ever heard the story where he was making just a bunch of paintings that were abstract expressionist paintings, and he was not and I think some of those pieces were really great. He just like he wanted to get away from that, so he burned a majority of them. He took them to a big dump and burned them, or
Wow.
just threw them away, trashed them. And he was like,
Wow.
for the next, from now on, I'm just gonna make figurative paintings, and he did that. And like the body of work they made after that is just so. I feel like he caught on to something, and it was kind of like I feel like what he caught on to is kind of what I've been striving for with that. Like he has his paintings have this realness to them, and but um he's able to do all that while letting them flow so naturally, and letting like color and shape and form and like the movement of the mark of the brush be so dynamic in the work. He's able to do that. He's able to achieve those he's able to achieve that realness um in with the subtlety of expression of whatever his technique is gonna, whatever drives his technique. And it's that's something that I do strive for. Not saying I want my work to look like his, but I do strive for kind of feeling in the work. I also just feel like it's what separates craft from, like the work that we make is like as visual artists from craft and trying to make a product and make it look like a certain thing, whether it's an abstract piece, non-objective or objective, which is what narrative painting would fall under that category. I feel like it's something that drives us, is that we're looking for that sense of realness. Even in Mark Rothko, he's looking for that sense of realness in his work, whether it's
Yeah,
just that
sure.
just the way he's applying mark or scraping color onto a surface, versus an Edward Hopper trying to basically paint a particular time and place. But also his paintings like blur the lines of of uh, of plein air, or like of painting something like as it is, and also incorporating details that make them seem like more like scenes from a movie. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
his work
definitely.
kind of
Hmm.
like does that weird mix that I absolutely love. He's like my favorite painter for those reasons. Like
Yeah,
he's
he,
just
well,
yeah,
he,
he it's so easy for him. I think I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe he really labored over his work or something. But
I'm sure
uh,
he did, man. I mean, I'm sure he labored in the way that Park, did, and
right.
Rothko did. I mean, I feel like every painter, labors through crisis, in their work. And of course, we don't want the painting to feel labored, right? But we certainly, as painters, labor. And part of that is the handling of the material and its expression and technique and process and the systems that we develop and arrive at, based on, like, our values and what we desire, in the work. And the craft certainly is a large aspect of that. But yeah, like you were saying, like the work transcends beyond it, beyond craft, into something different. And I think that, you know it's interesting because Hopper, he is able to capture this incredible amount of tension, in his work, and it's psychological, and at times I would say it's even spiritual. And Rothko certainly does the same thing, just in a different way. Um, I think, it seems that Rothko was certainly after something that was transcendent for him, and oil paint, certainly, or just painting in general as a language, has the ability to point to the transcendent, um, uh, even just as a physical object, a physical symbol, right? But I'm interested in, you had mentioned Park, and David Park, and he's a very physical painter. Um, but I saw that in your work, you tend to be not quite as physical, like your work is thinner. So how do you, like what is your takeaway from Park, in terms of how that informs your work?
Yeah, yeah, he definitely puts more paint on the surface for sure. Uh, I I think it's the way I'm really into painters that like are the way they perceive light. He's one of those painters that he squints his eyes when he paints, and like he can see he's thinking of values. And I'm a value first painter because I feel like drawing Um, Drawing was always about value for me, and like how I see seeing lights and darks, and I kind of approach painting that way. And like I don't really, I don't think I'm a colorist so much. Like I put colors that I feel like help accentuate the light and dark. But I don't really know how colors interact, or I don't have a specific set of rules for it. I just go with whatever I feel like works.
Mhm.
Um, and those are things that I feel like Park was had an incredible gift at, and um, so I really gravitate to his work for that. And a lot of other painters, Felford Porter, and Alice Neal for the way they saw light and were able to capture light in their work. And like I said, Hopper's like the king in my opinion for light. And I just really like that, and that their paintings are so direct and like just kind of clear. You don't really have to think too much when you see their work. It's just like
Mhm.
it's all put right there in front of you, and it's really the feeling and the spirit of their work that really shines. Is it really propels you to stay for a little bit longer. Um, and I just really, it's not, yeah. Uh, I hate when artists like think technique is the only thing that matters, because yeah, it's great to see certain marks and like how they maybe twist a brush to make a form look a certain way, but like it's really the energy and the feeling that comes from the work that really matters to me.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah.
I really like that about their work. Of course, the physicality and all that, and like their techniques are great. But like and I've obviously studied that like crazy, deep in corn art painters like that, but just have an incredible technique. But yeah, there's something there that just is just magical. I can't really. It's hard to really explain. Like, so I have to like I spent like 3 hours looking at that David Park retrospective. Like I spent like a whole afternoon, and like yeah, it's yeah, that's just it's hard for me to really pinpoint what it is
Yeah.
about their work. It just
Well, it is. I
does
mean,
it.
like there are times when you find, even with somebody who on the surface would seem remote from even like, what would apparently be your interest as a painter. You'll find like a place of belonging in their work, and sometimes it is very difficult to pinpoint, to identify exactly what that is. Sometimes it's just the tone. I don't mean value, but like I mean like the emotional tone, or like the psychological tone, or like the spiritual tone. There's something that's being expressed that is more difficult to objectively identify. And but the idea is that, well, if I can just hang around this work long enough, maybe I can kind of like I can sort of consume this energy, harness it and carry it with me, and pour it into my work somehow, and like being in the midst of an aroma, and sort of like having that permeate you and carry that with you, right, to some other space. Um, yeah, there's something really, really powerful about that. I feel that way when I'm like looking at Lucian Freud paintings, you know, for example, or someone like Corot, you know. So technique, man, it's interesting you bring that up because, yeah, I mean, especially as a younger painter, I felt I placed an overemphasis on technique, thinking that that was what was going to help me move through what was then for me sort of my first interactions with the glass ceiling, or with the wall that had no door, or like with the windowless room, or whatever you want to call it, this block, this place where you have the desire to move forward in the work, but just lack the clear path, you know. And it feels like, God, I'm just in the midst of stagnation. Maybe I'll just hang it up and call it a day and go pursue something completely different. I'll go into sales or some whatever, you know. But the thing is, it's like, man, that's exactly what's needed. Like that struggle and the unwillingness to yield. Um, and because it turns into momentum, it turns into fire, it turns into um, fists, you know, and you fight your way through it. Um, or that's how at least I do. And it's, you know, it sounds violent. But for me, oftentimes it is. It's a very turbulent, explosive kind of process. Um, you know, I don't literally punch holes in the walls, but like, you know, I do figuratively, you know, um, whatever I can do. But I remember when I was in graduate school and I had a critic who whose work was heavily informed by technique, and it's because he was doing that on purpose as a part of his process because uh, he needed to implement the techniques of the masters, right? Like the Renaissance masters, in order to make the works that he was making, in order to introduce more like kind of contemporary techniques and the handling of the handling and the expression of the material. And I remember talking to him about this in my studio, and there was one thing that he was doing in particular that was of great interest. Well, it was all of interest to me, but one thing in particular that was really like getting me. And I asked him to foolishly, and I asked him to tell me how he does this, you know. Um, and this was such a gift because he said no, and and he told me why. He said because technique without context is meaningless. It's dead. And that was huge. And, you know, I it kind of left me stunned for a while, you know, but later on, it ended up meaning so much to me. And so I would say that, you know, uh, technique, while when we see it, when we see technique implemented and handled at a masterful level, it's so easy to just want to be like, oh man, well, if I could just do that, then my work will be at that level too. But that is an absolute uh, misdirected sentiment, because really what's going on is that there's this whole struggle, this whole striving that is behind that technique that is arrived at. It's something that the painter arrives at, you know, that is a result of that process, that is governed by the painter's desire and like the painter's values and like what the work needs and all of these things that have to be, you know, at some point instituted, understood, contemplated, fought for in the work. And so it becomes manifest through the material, because that's how we begin to, aside from image making and picture making, that's how we begin to alter the language, right? um, or refine it, and so that's actually like a really important thing when we talk about narrative painting, because, well, first of all, like what does it even mean to paint narratively, you know, in terms of like the handling of the materials, in terms of the image, in terms of the surface and the size scale, um so like what is that for you?
Yeah, I think for me, what it's been is it's like finding a way to like have a way in to whether it's a space. It could like a Matthias Weischer. I feel like his works can, it seems like he's thinking of narrative, or he's thinking of just like painting a particular interior space as a place, but they also feel narrative. They don't always have to have a figure, but if there is a figure, it has to give the viewer a way in to this the psychology of um the situation or the character or like what's going on. But someone has to sort of relate. It has to have some sense of relating to the situation, what's going on, or a particular figure, maybe a figure that's who knows what the emotion that you're trying to capture with them is going to be. But um, I feel like there has to be a way in. It's just like, talking about film. I don't want to keep recalling the same things over and over, but we're watching a movie and that first scene where it's like, uh, we're like, okay, this is what this character's like. Okay, I get it now. Like you can sometimes a good director can pull you in, uh, like a Tarantino or something, the first scene, and you're like, oh, this is what I'm in for.
Yeah.
Um, like like that kind of thing. Like you have to find a way to not necessarily it's that as a painter that you have to immediately know where it's going, because I feel like you put a wrong mark on there on the face and it's like it turns from a frown to a smile in a matter of seconds. So
Hmm.
it's but yeah, it's kind of what I was talking about. Like you have to find a way to like, or at least it's just a way, into that scene. Um, However, again, he would have these dynamic scenes with two or three characters in a room. I'm thinking of the office paintings of his,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
those paintings pulled you in. Not necessarily like the facial expressions of the figures because they were always very bleak and like there's not a whole lot going on there, uh, but there's something going on with the way the light in the room is like cast upon these figures, almost like he's established a scene for on a stage play.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, it's like light reveals, right?
yeah,
So when the light reveals the the expression on the figures' faces, that I think helps, especially like the color and the expression itself. I feel like his expressions, they're not, for me, they're not vacant.
mhm.
They're almost like hopeless. It's almost like they're caught. It's like they're caught. They realize they are stuck in something. They're caught in something
Right.
that for it to end, they have to end. And then once it's ended, that's it. And so it's kind of like, well, what is this really all about? Um, and I feel like so there's like isolation, there's lust, there's passion, there's withdrawal, there's yearning, there's hoping, but hoping beyond the apparent reality that is depicted in the scene or in that figure's world, right? They're incredibly existential in that way, wrestling with, and it's probably something that Hopper was wrestling with himself, or something that uh, he was sort of working through ideals,
Yeah.
which right, which certainly are echo in our time as well, right? Um, these, I mean, these are universal, you know. But I'm curious as to, like, in your own work, do you have a predetermined sense of what it is you're painting into narratively, or is it like as the painting develops, the narrative develops, and you kind of like sort of as you develop the painting, you're developing the narrative, and you kind of figure out what it's about, as it progresses, or is it something like, look, these are the themes that are really important to me. This is what I want to make images about, and I'm going to use these themes to govern the way that the image is made and how it's expressed and the colors that are being used and the positioning of the figures. Because you were talking about using drawing to kind of position the figures in ways that you're wanting them to be in. So I was kind of curious about that.
Yeah, I do have a predetermined idea of like where I want the painting to go. Um, Whatever happens with color or you know certain details in the space, whether I paint a certain object in there that helps to propel the narrative further, or just to to make it seem more lively, or whatever you want to call that. Those things will usually come a little bit later. I'm mostly concerned about the meat of it, like the main figures of the setting or of the image. So I do have a predetermined idea of where it's going to go. Sometimes I'll go through, maybe two sketches will be enough. Maybe I'll do like five or six sketches just of the same figures over and over, or set of figures, just to get an idea of where I think it's going to go in the painting. And also just to get a handling of familiarity with them, because I
Yeah,
want to see.
yeah,
Oftentimes, I'm like, I paint this figure, and I do paint. Actually, when I was talking about like um, Hopper, and I was talking about the expressions. Sometimes it's the figures that are standing away, that are facing away, that I'm more drawn into. Like in Nighthawks, the figure that's wearing the fedora, and he's got his coffee sitting there, and he's turned away. Oftentimes, I'm more interested in him, and I've incorporated a lot of figures turned away in my paintings. Um, and um, but also like if I am painting someone, um, I do see their facial expression. Um, it might take me like five or six sketches to really arrive at what I want.
mhm,
And then when I finally get to painting it, I'm like, okay, I look at that one, I'm like, that's how I want it to look. If I can get it that way, that would be great. Sometimes it doesn't look exactly that way, so it just and it might look even better, in the painting, or
yeah,
worse. So I just have to keep
yeah,
I just have to keep working it. But it's you know like I was saying, like that's crucial for me sometimes, because like that can be the deal breaker in a piece, like the expression or the gesture of the body, or something's not clicking.
yeah, yeah,
I have to, yeah. So those things are definitely the things that I like. They're predetermined, but also like they're constantly changing when I'm working the piece. And
yeah,
it's hard to really capture that how you want it, to really have the narrative seem a certain way, or to or to at least have the energy to be a certain way. It can go from like something suspenseful to funny to you know to overly dramatic, with just a few different strokes of the brush. So it's yeah, it's
do you
interesting how
think
it works.
dude, I'll tell you what, man, it is interesting. It's like crazy. Like, that's what separates like a sergeant from a Goya, right? Like Sargent had an incredible amount of just ability. But it can't touch Goya. Like he can never touch Goya because Goya, who easily has as much, and certainly more in a sense in terms of maturation, like natural ability as Sargent. Like Goya was able to transcend his ability, and because he was pursuing something greater than his ability, he was pursuing something. He was using his ability to pursue something that for him was much bigger. Um, and it carries through in his work. It carries through in the way that he relates to form, and the figure and everything that he paints. Like it comes through. So it reflects his relationship to those things, as a figurative painter, as a narrative painter. And I'm curious because you mentioned Hopper and the figures that are turned away. So then you were like, and I have figures oftentimes turned away in my work. And I'm curious as to how that translates for you. Do you feel like, um, by having your figures turned away from the viewer in your paintings, are you finding that you're able to capture in your work what Hopper was able to capture in his by turning his figures away from the viewer?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit different. Um, I think the way I do it, I mean, there are some similarities. There are some similarities, I guess, because like um, there's oftentimes you feel like you're on a journey with these figures that are turned away. It's like you can easily place yourself in their shoes. Oftentimes, when you see their faces, you're like they have an identity that gives them some sense of identity. But like when the figures turn away, uh, it can be someone young or old. You know, whatever they look like, it doesn't that doesn't matter. When someone's turned away, um, I feel like it. Not saying it draws you in even more because there's obviously when you can see someone's expression on their face in a painting like that those things pull you in someone's eyes, you know, whatever it is that that shows emotion. Those things pull you in, but when someone's turned away, I feel like you're brought into like you almost like feel like you jump into their body and you place yourself into their space that they're surrounded by in the painting, the space that you're painting. Um, uh, I think of that a lot, and I don't know. I'm constantly talking about movies, but Darren Aronofsky's The Wrestler. You're watching Mickey Rourke, you know, walking into the arena, or even and how that mirrors when he, you know, because he's a down and out wrestler in the film, how that mirrors him like taking some random job in a grocery store, and him walking into an arena mirrors how he's walking into the deli section of the, you know, to slice meat. I don't know. I feel like you can place yourself in his shoes when you're following him from behind. I don't know. You're on that journey with them. It's almost like you're also on a journey with them, but you're a voyeur. You're not as much afraid to like put yourself there because they're turned away, and you're like, uh, I don't know how to really explain that, but like that's kind of like how it's always been for me, and I don't know, maybe other people kind of feel the same way, but like um it does make the paintings a little bit more voyeuristic, I guess, if that's the right term. Um, you know, seeing like John Carpenter's Halloween and Michael Myers like looking at Laurie Strode as she's walking away from him when he's hiding behind the bushes and he comes back and like she's, you know, she's walking away and like yeah.
So like hold on. So are we like the viewers of your paintings? Are we like hiding in the bushes, like Mike Myers,
Maybe
watching the figures walk away from us? So
maybe I
what
don't
is
know.
what is uh you paint narratively. So what is your work? What is your work about?
Um, say what it's about. It does it is based on the content of the work is influenced on the American Indian boarding schools and things that happen at the boarding schools, and I've based it around like stories from that and
You
how
mean like out of personal
relation
experience, or
not not personal experience. There were about nine um, in our community that were sent to that went to Carlisle Indian school in Pennsylvania years ago. There were a lot more from other reservations, not as many from where I'm from, but that was a way of basically whitewashing American Indian people at the time. So they a lot of times forcibly removed kids from reservations and placed them in in these areas where they had to become something else. They had to become like white people and forget their Indian ways, their languages, and all that stuff. So a lot of times there was a displacement that happened. Um, I mean, everyone experiences things different. Some people were able to handle it better than others. A lot of people died at those places. Some people tried to run away and escape. All in all, it was a very traumatic thing for indigenous people as a whole, and it went on for a very long time. But uh, one of the things I've tried to address with the work is like tell their stories, try to address their stories, but in ways that feel like giving them a voice in how they like experience everyday life, and not necessarily. I used to just reference photographs that I was finding from archives and stuff and painting portraits of them. But now I've been diving more into the psychology behind like what it is that I might feel that they would have experienced, and it does relate to me because because I place myself in their shoes when I read these stories, and myself as identifying as a Native person, and just the struggles that I deal with every day as trying to identify as a Native person today, and how it relates to what they were going through. I do. There is a kinship there. There's a connection, um, and you know, I'm constantly trying to revitalize culture, learning, trying to relearn our languages so we can use them for ceremonies. Like that's huge for me. Um, so I it's very personal work, but it's also something that I'm constantly learning about because I didn't attend those schools, and I have a lot of friends. I mean, my parents didn't attend those schools, but I have a lot of friends who are descendants of like survivors of those schools, and I call them survivors because they had to overcome that and relearn how to become Indian again, like how to actually survive as Indian people. So it's yeah, it's very broad work, but it's on a specific it's very specific content, and I want I want to I want to give Native people a voice in in that way, um,
hmm.
as a way of like readdressing the past, but also like you know comparing it to like our present day um, struggles.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it sounds like you have an incredible amount of content to work with and wrestle with, which is fantastic. And it's also wonderful that it's such a an integral part of you and your identity and your culture, and your community. I find that. having four children, and being a caregiver, and like all of these things, they sort of, you know, they work themselves into the work, and without many times me even being aware of it. Just because it's such an integral part of who I am and how I live my life and spend my time, and what I value, what I desire and things like that. Um, and it makes a lot of sense too as to why you would rely on photographic references, because you're recalling instances and people from the past, as well as the present, that you are not directly um, you know in conversation with, or in touch with, but in a very but still connected to them, through this shared heritage. So that's that's pretty powerful, man. It seems like, I mean, do you feel like, and it seems like because I mean, especially now that you have moved from, I mean, you're still using photographic references, which I feel like is actually kind of mandatory for your process. It's really important. Um, but it's interesting that you're also moving into this area of practice of drawing through it, because it's like you are really placing yourself artistically, in this context, right? In this narrative, through drawing, and you're relating to everything that at once was through the photograph, through like that type of image. You're sort of you're moving into a deeper place, a more intimate, personal expression of that place through your drawing. And as that manifests, that certainly will inform and influence the way that you paint, uh, the way that not just the way that you paint the images, but the images themselves, and the way that you compose them, and pictorially, will certainly change because of that, and they'll become a lot, much more personalized, um, because you've already made that departure through drawing, right? So that's really that's pretty awesome. When I think about that, how you're moving through the work and the process, and how you're developing that way, I think it's really, really amazing, man. There's a lot of, I mean, there's just there's a lot of opportunity there, a lot of potential, there. Do you, do you feel like that you've arrived at where you want to be in your work? Um, or how do you feel about it?
In some ways, yeah. Like one one of the key things for me was to just getting away from directly referencing photographs and like that, uh, and the drawing aspect of it, and really bringing that more into the work. That I feel like I've arrived at, like to a point where I feel comfortable with it. Feel comfortable with that process and letting that process like kind of like go wherever it's going to go. Um, who knows how long I'll kind of like stay in this type of like subject matter, and like where if the subject matter will continuously evolve, it should, and it will. I just don't know when and like what areas it's gonna go, but from here, but um, just let the work happen naturally and see where it's see what kind of things. Maybe I'll come avoid the past, altogether, and just only do things that are like strictly contemporary for now. But I like the work to be timeless. I'm one of those guys that I'm one of those people that like I'm not. It, I don't have a lot of interest in things that are happening, that with technology and things that we use today, and like people on their phones and like trying to use that to allow for characters to develop. I, yeah, it's not saying that I have to do that, but um, that's not something that I'm really interested in. I don't really want to make a painting with someone having their laptop open in a room setting and like all of that stuff. You know, I guess I'm kind of like old school where I like things from like certain styles from like say the 70s or the 60s or earlier and like just how things looked in those periods. Uh, uh, Coincidentally, it just happens to be when those boarding schools were still around. The last boarding schools, went away in like 1978, and at least the ones that were like where they had those type of rules.
Mm-hmm.
There's still Indian schools today, but they're not. They're nothing like the Pratt schools, the kill the Indian, save the man schools, and yeah, I don't know. Who knows where the work's gonna go, but I do feel I'm in a place where I feel like the work can continuously expand. And
Good.
that's
That's
a good
awesome.
place. I don't want to be in a place where I'm like make a one-off series and who knows where it's gonna go after. I can't really do anything else. I want it to be. I do want to be in a place where I know I can continuously make work and have a show after a show after a show, and I think I can do it with this. But who knows? Who knows where it's going to go from here?
Well, it sounds like, man, again, it sounds like there's a lot of potential there and a lot to explore in your work, and that's really exciting. It's very exciting, man. So tell me, where could one go to see your work?
Yeah. So my Instagram is where I mostly post a lot of my images, and where people can find my website in the link in the bio. So my Instagram handles Marcus two underscores Dunn, and my website marcusbdunn.com. You can, you can see my work on there, see any updates if you want. Like and follow. That would be awesome.
Right on,
But
man. And that's Marcus two underscores Dunn, right?
yes,
Okay.
yes,
Right on, man. Okay, cool. Marcus, man, thank you so much for being joining me today and being here. I've really enjoyed meeting you and talking with you, man. I wish you just the absolute best in your endeavor artistically. Just, man, keep making paintings. It's exciting to see what you're doing, and I've really enjoyed hearing about it. And I've enjoyed talking with you, man. Thank you.
thank you so much, and I appreciate you doing this. This is a great opportunity just to, for you to meet people, for us to like engage, and just have these conversations. I think it's awesome. So I really appreciate this a lot.
It's my pleasure, man. Yeah. Well, let's keep in touch, dude.
All right, man. We will. Yeah, that sounds great.
Awesome, man. See you around, bud.
All right. Take care.